let's go. So this is round 5 of the tournament. And instead of going for the same, what's it called? Same colors, I went. First round was white, then black, then white, then black, and now I'm black, and then the last round I'm white again. So I do have 3 whites and 3 blacks in the end. This is yeah, I'm currently at 2.5 points out of 5, or out of 4, sorry. Spoilers. 2.5 out of 4, so I'm currently ahead, and my opponent is also therefore ahead, and well, we'll see what happens. Last game I played as black, and it was a d4 opening. This time it's a d4 opening again. But this time we basically played a Catalan-like structure. I played e6 again, and my opponent plays g3. After which I just play d5, bishop g2 and c5, and we move into a Catalan. I'm fairly certain this is technically a Catalan still, right? I mean, it's apparently just still played. This makes sense as an opening, at least. Castle, knight c6. Maybe I should take first. Though, but I played knight c6. And now c4 happened, and we move into practically just a Catalan, I think. And there are plenty of ways to capture stuff. You can take on c4, but that's usually not that great because of this bishop opening up. You can take on d4, you can do nothing. I don't like. I considered this for a bit. I considered taking, knight takes and playing e5, and then take, but actually because this pawn will then be sufficiently defended. So that would look like this. So we're basically playing a reverse Grunfeld. But that's probably not great, because I know from the Grunfeld as white you just barely have enough time to fix all of the problems of this stuff. Basically you're just barely fine by a single tempo, and now we're down a tempo. And let's see what the engine thinks. Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't do that. I actually just ignored it and let my opponent take in any way they want. And they decided to take on d5. I took back with the pawn to get this bishop out. Because if I take with the knight, then this is also stuck now. Or this is open for the bishop. And yeah, this trade is probably fine for me, but they probably won't do that. They just play e4 probably. And then I guess just go back. Maybe push here. Is that possible? No. Just not sufficiently defended. Yeah, e5 makes sense, and I just go back, and then we play this, which is an interesting position. But yeah, maybe that's better than what I did, because my opponent took here and I took with the bishop, and now I have an isolated queen pawn. But I do have a lot of pieces here, which is so I can I have compensations for this slightly weaker pawn. A3 happened here, and I wasn't sure about my move. I played the move a5 to prevent b4. I wasn't sure about that in the game. I thought that this bishop had enough room in this direction, but maybe b4 just generally is just a good move without putting the bishop here. So I guess it kind of makes sense. And my opponents after the game said that they would play b4 if I didn't play a5. But they play bishop g5 here. So it wasn't really to put the bishop here, maybe. And well, there's some pressure here. No. And if they take and I take with the queen, I lose my d pawn. So I can do a couple of things. I can defend like that. I can defend this pawn another way by basically... I can defend it by pushing. Do that. I can do this. That's still good enough, but I like my bishop on c5. I could try this, but then they take and I still have a terrible pawn structure. In the end I decided to play d4. That opens up this bishop, but it's probably okay. And if they take, I take, and everything's fine. I think d4 is probably accurate. It also prevents knight c3. So they went to d2. And I played a... I missed basically the plan of knight d2. Kind of plan. I was very tired here. Yeah, there was a lot of chess that happened, and this is round 5 and in a 3-day series, and it's like 10 o'clock in the morning or something. I'm just very tired here. I should just play bishop f5. Normal move, makes total sense. It also prevents knight e4, which is scary. So I played h3, but I played h6 instead, so they took. And played knight e4 to get back the bishop pair. I went to e7, but it doesn't matter. Anything that defends this bishop is good enough. Like f5 or something. But yeah, this trade, and now my opponent will start probably attacking this pawn in some smart way. I assumed that my opponent would play rook c1 here. I play queen b6 and then queen c2. And try to put the rook on the d file and put pressure on the c file mostly. Instead they played queen d2 and then basically put the rooks there and there. But yeah, queen d2 I did not expect. It's probably just fine. It's a choice. It also threatens this, which is a third attack on this pawn, so I need to, in 2 moves, be able to defend it. And there are plenty of ways to do that. I could probably play bishop e6 or something and play rook d8, but I instead castled and played with the plan of rook d8. Rook fd1, rook d8, rook ac1, and now my queen has to go to b6. And here they created a plan which I did not expect, but it actually just makes a lot of sense. The isolated queen pawn, you usually have to blockade it somehow, otherwise d3 might happen. I don't think d3 is very good here, but it's worth keeping an eye out for. So I played knight e1 with the plan knight e3, and in the meantime I had to find a good way to develop this bishop. I could play bishop f5, but the knight, I never want to take the knight. If the knight goes to c2 though to attack this pawn, I do kind of want to trade it, but only after this gets taken. In which case I think there's a line there that I can get c5 in before this pawn is lost, so then I'm totally fine there. But that's only after bishop f5. But I didn't expect... I kind of expected knight c2, but I realized that after bishop e6 I also get bishop b3 after knight c2, so I played bishop e6. Knight went to d3, and I went to b3 myself, which I talked about with my opponent after the game. And bishop b3, I think, is a concession that I am worse. Which, I mean, I do think so. But it's bishop b3, or I can play bishop d5 immediately. The game went like this. But I could have also played this and left the rook here. And the point is that in this variation, my opponent can in this variation, my opponent can play e3 here and take with the queen. No, with the queen. And we basically enter an endgame where probably my opponent is slightly better. It's basically equal. Whereas in this variation, e3 actually is really bad. Right? Actually, wait, no, e3 here. Yeah, because you get this pawn structure and I take here, and this is actually really bad, he says. Apparently it's just the same, and in this case you can take with the rook and it's totally fine. It's basically this pawn structure versus this pawn structure. And you can always pick that as white now. You can always just clean up everything and be basically equal, slightly better. I would argue slightly better. Would have argued that in the game. So yeah, I did that, and my opponent didn't play e3 because, I mean, they don't have to. But I thought that they could if I was better in this position, then bishop b3 would just give my opponent a chance to equalize, and bishop d5 immediately wouldn't. Yeah. So my opponent here played rook c5, which I underestimated, kind of. I expected the knight wanted to go there in some lines, but the rook basically forces me to trade. And now it is kind of putting pressure here. And also maybe going this direction and maybe allowing a double up. I expected rook c1, and I wanted to prevent it by playing a4, and the point is that in 2 moves I can get to here, which is a triple attack after rook c1, which is so rook c1 basically doesn't work anymore. I managed to calculate that even rook c1 here is still fine, and my opponent can wriggle out after knight a5 and planning to play knight b3 with exactly the plan that the knight goes to c7 and the queen goes to f4. And attacking here, which puts enough pressure to also be able to move this rook. Which is what happened. This there's a chance that this is a terrible move in retrospect, and if so, then I deserve it. Then I mean, I'm totally okay. If my position now goes from 0-0 to +2, then I'll play these moves for another 500 elo. I don't care. This is totally fine. Yeah. If I lose here, I deserve it basically, and I don't care. So queen goes to f4 first, which is relevant, because I had calculated rook c7 first, and here my plan was, there are a couple of things. I can play knight c6, but queen f4 and the rook gets saved, and there are some issues. I can also go here, of course, and queen c4 again. My plan here was to play queen d6, which prevents queen f4 and threatens knight b3 again. Oh, it doesn't actually prevent queen f4, but I would just take and probably play... Well, maybe not knight c6 there. But I would just take and be okay. So this seemed totally fine to me. This didn't happen. Apparently queen f4 is still fine. Queen b4 as well. But my opponent played queen f4 first, which is actually way more annoying because queen d6 isn't actually a threat here. It's not actually scary because they can just take and take the 7th rank regardless. So it's way worse for me to play queen d6. So instead I play queen e6 here. Respecting that my opponent would play rook c7 and get f7. Instead I played rook e5. And I need to be quite careful, but I can just barely prevent my opponent from reaching the 7th rank with exactly queen d7. Queen d6 loses because of this. I can't take because I lose my queen, and this is good enough. But also I believe this is just game over. Right? There was something here. Fairly certain this is game over. Not sure where exactly that would be again. Whatever. It's definitely game over. The other one is definitely game over. A lot more, so it's totally fine. Yeah. There's also this interesting line. Rook c7, which looks like it's undefended, and I can just take it, and I think it's probably correct. But they have rook e8 and win my queen, and but I do get e2 in the end, and we both basically thought that this was totally fine for me, probably even better for me than... Yeah, apparently not. Apparently you have knight e5. I mean, maybe you don't even take the... Maybe not taking the pawn is better. Apparently it is fine. But you just have knight e5 and then I'm in some trouble. Do I lose the knight here? Is that the thing? Is that the issue? No, I just lose the pawn. After which I can reroute in a way that my rooks connect again and the game is okay-ish here. I do lose my pawn apparently as well. None of this happened, so I'm totally fine looking at it with the engine. So queen d7 did happen, and they just went rook f5 here. Putting pressure here. It's currently defended, so it's totally fine. But the main issue I found is that it actually attacks this knight. And rook c7 is on its way. So there are two options I could do. I could play knight c6 here, which seems like a good idea. But I was afraid of knight c5 here, I think. And then I'd have to go... Right? Is this... Maybe this is not that bad. Maybe this is just better. But I played g6 with the point that rook basically has to go to f6 because everything, the entire 5th rank is mine. Actually, you can go here. You can't go there, or there. Or there. So they basically had 3 options, and f6 is definitely the best option. I do sack this pawn in some variations, but now I can play rook c8, rook ac8, without losing this knight, which I thought was useful. Rook takes. Maybe I should have included this check in retrospect as well. don't think it matters. And here my opponent played knight e5, putting another piece here. And this is actually very scary. I underestimated knight e5. At some point there was, I believe it was here, I castled and there I realized there are no pawns, no pieces here around my king, and so maybe a bit scary, especially after I moved the rook out. But I mean, all the pieces are going to go here, so what are the odds that actually a kingside attack happens? And a kingside attack is happening. And actually it's very deadly, because I can't actually properly defend the pawn. On either of them you get knight takes g6, which is just game over. Here knight g6. You can take like this. Maybe here you have to go here. No. You probably just take there. King. No. You have to go here. Is this holding? No, it's not. Yeah. So that's game over if I defend like that, and if I defend like this you still get knight g6 because the pawn is just pinned and the rook has to move, and then you take here. Actually you don't take there, no. You take here. Where's the win? You tell me. Take there. Let's give this check. Apparently announces mate in 5. Not d3 obviously, you take there. There. That's the checkmate. Okay. So, I can't actually defend. Also my queen is hanging. So I have to play queen d5, which I did see in the game. And f3, which gave me a bit of hope. Because in a lot of lines I could do something like this, or in some lines, and this could be something. So I played g5, which forces queen f5, and now there's a pin here, so I could attack it, but actually my rook is also hanging, which is unfortunate. I could play rook e8 as well to basically, this forcefully wins a piece, but it just doesn't matter because I get checkmated in every line. I tried this and this, and I just get checkmated here, and I resign here. I'm fairly certain this is rook c7 was the best move, and this is also an attempt, but that's just definitely game over. This at least gives me something, but like, ha, nice. Yeah, nice, good enough. Yeah, so I lost this game, and I don't think I had any chance at any point in the entire game. I was always at least, or either we played an opening or I was just slightly worse, at least in every position we played. a5 is correct, cool. d4 is correct. h6 is not. Yeah, my opponent is better now. Hey! Queen d2 is incorrect, that's interesting. Queen a4, actually that makes sense as well, to prevent pawn a4. Castle, rook, rook, rook. Yeah. Yeah, this is all totally fine. I'm still slightly worse here. Yeah. Oh, knight a5 is apparently good, but it's not good enough. And he played knight b3 regardless. Fascinating. Apparently that's not good because of rook e5, which I missed. Rook c7 forced, queen e6 now. Oh, that makes sense actually. That you can just barely survive now. Yeah, but I missed rook e5, which was really bad. Yeah. And I should play the check in between. Actually, it doesn't matter, because I played this check anyways. Yeah, and this is just a series of unfortunate events here, because I do actually win this piece in every line that I attack it. But I just get checkmated in every line that I do as well. Yeah, and it's just... the line that I would have played actually is f6 here. But that also doesn't work. Because that... Yeah. So yeah, now I'm equal. 2.5 out of 5. Like I said at the start, whoopsie. This was a good game for my opponent. I never really had a chance, and yeah. Knight a5 was apparently still fine, but I do have to go in, really. Because apparently there's nothing here. What about that? Oh, yeah. Crazy. And here... You could also do that, but this is also fine. Crazy stuff. I was apparently a bit too chicken to play knight b3, but it's fine. We've got one more game, and I am extremely tired in that game. That's no excuses or anything, but that's just how a tournament goes. And I'll see you there.